I'll see you then. Hey photographers, when I heard about the Samsung S23 Ultra's camera capabilities, I asked, can you send me that? Next thing I know, it's the slogan for this product, which is a phone. But in this video, it's a camera. Now, this camera is on loan from Samsung Canada through their media agency. Neither paid me, told me what to say, and they didn't see the video or the script before posting. And I'm not sponsored by any company. There will be no ad interruptions in this video. Now, the S23 Ultra doesn't use much of the same terminology that would be familiar from other cameras. And even when it does, it's not really equivalent. This camera was designed for a cohort of photographers who are less concerned with tech and more concerned with the image. They're having fun and want to create memories, capturing the excitement of the moment and share them with friends. The slogan, "Can you send me that?" captures it perfectly. So I'm doing my best to let this camera stand on its own merits without getting hung up on photo terms and settings. This camera isn't trying to recreate what traditional cameras do and how my cohort of advanced hobbyists and aging practitioners like to do things. And if that upsets my cohort, I'm sorry. But this camera is certainly worth a detailed look. So I'm going to show you what the S23 Ultra can do, how it works, and how well it works. I'm not going to spend the next 20 minutes comparing it to other cameras. The results will speak for themselves. I will show you photos and videos taken with this camera. Photos are also posted to Flickr for a detailed look if you need. And this video is posted in 4K, which provides the equivalent of 8 megapixel resolution for photos. All of the images the S23 Ultra takes exceed that. Now, it weighs 233 grams, and its largest dimension is about 16 centimeters. That makes it small and light. But I will say that it is slightly hard to hold. Some kind of selfie stick-like grip is advised. Now, there are no memory slots. This is the 512 gig model, about 450 gigs available storage. And in this video, I've recorded the screen using the native screen recorder, and I will primarily use it in this landscape mode, simply because that will fill your screen. Most will prefer upright or portrait mode. And you'll see that some controls don't rotate to landscape orientation. Now, there are actually 5 cameras in this device, 4 on the back, the lens side, 1 more on the front, the screen side. And the middle of this trio is the highest resolution, 200 megapixels. 2 more are 12 megapixels, the last 2 are 10 megapixels. Video recording capability goes up to 8K at 30 frames per second. Slow motion to 960 frames per second. Played at 30 frames, that's like 30 times slow. Now, as this is a multi-purpose device, activate the camera by double pressing the side key. Or there's a camera icon on the home screen. Preview your composition on the 17 centimeter diagonal AMOLED touchscreen display. And that means active matrix organic light emitting diode. 3088 by 1440 resolution, refreshing at 120 frames per second. That's not the default. Use Settings, Display, scroll down to Screen Resolution and select WQHD. Might also want to adjust the screen mode. Vivid has several color adjustment options, but I'm going with natural. I also reset the timeout. 30 seconds is very short. And I'm also setting easy mode to make the display easier to read in this video. Now, the screen image is bright and crystal clear. It goes to the very edges of the device, and the large button displayed at the bottom or side takes a picture. Tap to select a focus point. Slide left and right to make the image brighter or darker. Hold the touch to lock exposure and focus. Lock is retained after the image is taken. A thumbnail of the image you've just taken appears. Touch it to open the image. In the upper right, 3 dots lead to a menu with details. file size, resolution, aperture, EV, shutter duration, focal length, and ISO, as well as location. Interesting. Now, this camera doesn't have settings like program or aperture priority. It's all just automated, so it's interesting to see those settings, but I would suggest they're kind of a distraction. On this camera, the settings don't really matter, the results do. The engineers and developers use the technical wizardry enabled by the S23 Ultra's components, automating functions to create pleasing results. That frees the photographer from the need to understand technical jargon and confusing camera terminology. Now, some who are proficient with the settings, yeah, you and me, may be frustrated, but I'm not, as this automation enables me and you to devote our attention to composing the image, framing our subject, and snapping the shutter to meet our creative vision. The right side, left-facing chevrons return to the camera. The third icon on the left selects aspect ratio and resolution. Full, a 7.5 megapixel image. 1:1 or square, 9 megapixels. 16:9, the video aspect, 9 megapixels. 4:3, standard photo, 12 megapixels. And so far, all are about 3 megabyte files for this scene. And then a 50 megapixel 4:3 variant, bumping file size to 8 megs, and also a 200 megapixel 4:3 mode, resulting in a 28 meg file. And those are the JPEG files. And I think I'll use the 50 megapixel setting as my default. Now, when that's selected, it's the middle lens that's used. Now, the camera wasn't entirely happy staying in 4:3 50 selection, so the bottom left settings icon opens a menu where I found settings to keep. That sets 50 or 200 as the default. Now, there are also advanced picture options where high-efficiency images can be selected, as well as RAW, with or without JPEG. The S23 Ultra's RAW files are saved in the DNG, Adobe's digital negative file format. To take a DNG image on the right side, select More and then Pro. In this mode, a second overlay menu appears to adjust white balance, shutter duration, ISO, and other settings. You can override the computer when the automated results don't serve your creative vision. Shutter duration, called speed here, can be set using a sliding ruler from 30 seconds to 1/12,000, generally in half-stop increments. A button at the bottom returns to auto. ISO can be set from 50 to 3200, 1/3 stop increments to 800, then full stop 1600 and 3200. EV indicates the exposure. The second button on the left side sets the meter mode, 3 options: matrix, spot, and center weighted. There is no aperture setting as that's fixed with these lenses. The middle lens's aperture is f1.7, and its equivalent focal length is 23 millimeters. Press W to change the focal length. There's a stepped scale for 2, 4, and 6 times zoom, and a slider for settings in between. Now, when you do this, the JPEG images are all 50 megapixels, the one-time DNG is 50 megapixels, all zoom DNG images are 12 megapixels. If you want the editing flexibility of DNG, best to confine yourself to 1x. Now, also, on the settings menu, the shooting methods option, voice commands, or a floating shutter button that can be positioned on the screen are available. Now, I'm finding that useful in the bottom left to snap with my left thumb. And we've taken a bunch of images of this scene. Let's have a closer look at the results. This is the 4:3 base image enlarged so that 1 pixel in the image maps to 1 pixel in this 4K video. Then the 4:3 50 image mapped 1:1, lots of detail and clarity. And 4:3 200, again pixel to pixel for 4K. I'm looking for digital processing artifacts, smudging, color fringing. This is crisp and clear. That's amazing. Let's continue with color management. We found white balance in the Pro settings from 2300 Kelvin to 10,000 in 100-unit increments. Leave 4x350, and the top left button activates the picture profile settings: tint, saturation, shadows, highlights, and contrast, each controlled with a slider. Back in photo mode, the other focal lengths are now available: 0.6, the equivalent of 13 millimeters, 3 times the equivalent of 69 millimeters, and 10 times the equivalent of 230 millimeters. But not always. If you're very close to something, a macro-like mode kicks in and detail reports 69 millimeters. And all of these are 12 megapixel images. An interesting feature here is the motion capture, this icon. When enabled, the image includes a few seconds of video along with the image. Also, in these modes, a best shot composition guide appears after a few seconds. Align the two circles. This can be turned off using settings. It's called shot suggestions. Faces are detected. Select one or multiple subjects. Switch from photo to portrait to blur the background. The strength slider adjusts the effect, and there are more effects both here and after you've taken the image. Use the Change Background Effect selection, and you'll find Blur, Studio, High Key Mono, Low Key Mono, Backdrop, Color Point. All of these also have effect strength sliders. The top right button changes to filter selection, 12 to choose from, or press the plus button to download or create your own. There are an additional set of controls for faces: smoothness, tone, jawline, and eyes, and on-off for with-without comparison. Let's go back to the More screen where we found Pro. There are scenes for night, which exposes the scene for a couple of seconds. Watch the moon create a good exposure. And food. Not sure what it enhances exactly, but there is a color temperature slider and a blur vignette. But I'm distracted by Bixby Vision. Its features include translating text and identifying wine, and AR Zone, where you can create emojis and animate them with live on-camera movement. I'm sure TikTok creators will find this very fun and useful. This is Panorama. Pan across the scene, and the S23 Ultra creates the orama. Also a bunch of video features here. We'll get to that soon, but first, burst. Now I'll turn off RAW, so we're taking just JPEG. Let's try 4x350. Slide the shutter button to the right. Nope. 4x3 then. Looks like burst is limited to 100 images, about 25 per second. They appear in a stack. Select them all, or just the ones you want, and they're saved. Again, 12 megapixel files. Burst isn't available in Pro mode either. Now, I did try the moving train continuous focus test. It's not possible to have a shallow depth of focus, and there's no tracking in stills mode, but the scene looks good as the train moves through. Recording a burst seems to lock focus. The long auto shutter duration makes the results a little blurry. Now, for video, I used my DJI Osmo gimbal as a grip. The basics of video are simple. Slide or tap the selector to video and select resolution and frame rate. Tap the current setting from the left and select from HD 30, defined as space-saving low resolution. It records about 10 megabits per second. FHD 30, which is the default, running at 15 megabits. FHD is also available at 60. Then UHD 30, ultra-high resolution, usually called 4K. That records at 41 megabits. Seems slow, but this is H.265. There's also a 4K 60 frame mode. And 8K 30, the highest resolution, but with a crop. In stills, that would be 33 megapixels, with a data rate of 80 megabits per second. And again, although I recorded this shot in 8K, video is 4K. In the advanced video settings, the codec can be changed to H.264 instead of the default high-efficiency H.265, and there are options to enhance video quality with larger file sizes or to reduce the file size. Then, a high bitrate setting for the Pro Video mode, an even higher recording rate. Also, a high dynamic range HDR10 setting for H.265. And a couple of audio options. At 4K 30, this is a sample with the higher bitrate, 96 megabits per second, more than double the default. And then adding HDR10 for increased dynamic range, that's not entirely fair, as this is a standard dynamic range project that doesn't change the bitrate. Keeping those settings, I'm changing the aspect ratio full, an interesting super wide 4620 by 2160 resolution, bitrate back down to 40. Let's also try the 1:1 1440 square at 35 megabits per second. Well, always nice to have options. Focal length for most modes can be set at 0.6, 1, 3, and 10 times, unless you select the Super Steady mode, then only 0.6 and 1. The Super Steady is another one of the settings to keep options. I found the standard steady mode is plenty steady. This walking scene was recorded without the Osmo. Then this alternate take recorded with Super Steady on. Filter selection, the same set as stills, is not available with UHD 30 and up. And in options, there's an auto FPS setting, reducing the frame rate and likely reducing the shutter duration to increase brightness in the dark. A menu option turns video stabilization off, but note that even when off, Super Steady can still be selected on the main screen. Use the More setting to access Pro Video mode, providing on-screen access to ISO, shutter duration, focus, white balance, and audio selections, which includes USB and Bluetooth connected mics. The More selection screen also includes slow and super slow motion modes. Super slow-mo has a motion detection setting activating when the action starts. Hyperlapse, in addition to auto, there are settings from 5 to 60 times fast, and night settings, which include 300 times for Star Trail videos. Didn't have the right sky opportunity to try that. And in addition to unlimited, there are timer options from 10 minutes to 5 hours. Director's View combines front and back camera views. There's an option to save the single view with the thumbnail or to save both as individual files. Then the intriguing single take setting. The What to Capture screen selects which features you want enabled and then will save a variety of still and video recordings from your shoot. Playback includes some interesting features. If I look at an image of a flower, it suggests not just other flowers, but specific types. Although it got tulips and daffodils right, it mistook cherry blossoms as hibiscus. And any image you've taken in portrait mode can be modified, a change background effect, with even more than the settings available while taking the live image. Big Circle does a very interesting bokeh simulation. And you can extract images from video, which might actually be better than burst. Record 8K video, which records 30 frames per second without a time limit, and the extracted images are 33 megapixels. So, as I said at the beginning, this camera is about the results, not settings or specs. This camera really comes from a parallel dimension where the history of photography was very different from the one that's familiar to me, to us. The designers, engineers, and developers who created this camera did not have access to the components we take for granted in a camera, but still created a device that can record images. And that means they took this art in a different direction than those experienced in the traditional methods of photography. There are creative settings and interesting features here that are completely new to me. It's certainly more than I can explore in a 2-week review or include in a 20-minute video. Color me impressed. So nice to enjoy this alternate view of photography. And from paintings to holograms, there are lots of ways to create images. Let 100 flowers bloom. Let 100 schools of thought contend. This is not a competition. There doesn't have to be a winner. All can be appreciated and enjoyed. Let us enjoy the capabilities of human creative expression in the most open and accepting way possible. Not good, not bad, just different. Photography evolution continues, and we are not finished yet. One minor aggravation worth mentioning, the S23 Ultra switches out of camera mode after a minute or two of non-activity. And the lack of detailed or complete specifications and the high level of the manual can be frustrating. Lots of trial and error to provide the kinds of detail I want to include in my videos. But as the saying goes, it is what it is. And that's not different from other phone apps, which rely on touching and trying everything. Do that. Of course, what I've shown you is the native camera app on this device. In the Android Play Store, you'll find alternate photo apps for creating and editing images. There may be another that suits your style or your needs better. As I said, this camera goes back to Samsung's Toronto media agency. I'm not paid or sponsored by any company. My revenue comes from Google Ads and your kind super thanks. I'm happy to read and reply to your civil comments and relevant questions. So thanks for finding the time to watch today. Stay safe.